They used to ask me when it started. I never had an answer. Some people can point to a date, a moment, a confession. For us, there was no beginning dramatic enough to remember. We simply kept walking. I met her when life had already taken most of its sharp turns. I was no longer young enough to dream loudly, and she was no longer the kind of woman who believed in promises. We were both polite with our pain, careful not to let it show. She lived 2 streets away from mine. Same grocery store, same evening walks, same tired expressions pretending not to be tired. We noticed each other the way lonely people do, slowly, cautiously, without hope. At first, it was just a nod. Then a greeting. Then one day, without planning it, we walked together. No introduction, no question, just footsteps aligning. People assume love announces itself. But sometimes, it arrives quietly, sits beside you, and waits to see if you'll ask it to stay. We didn't. We talked about weather, about back pain, about how the city had changed. Never about hearts. She told me once she had been married. I told her once I had been alone longer than I admitted. We never asked why those stories ended. At this age, explanations feel heavier than silence. Every evening, we walked the same path. When she didn't come one day, I felt a strange restlessness, not panic, just absence. The kind you feel when a habit disappears. The kind you pretend doesn't matter. The next day she returned, apologizing. I wasn't feeling well, she said. I nodded, relieved, pretending it didn't matter. That became our pattern. Care without claim. Concern without ownership. She brought extra fruit sometimes. I fixed the loose handle on her gate. No thank you felt necessary. No label required. People around us began to notice. You two are always together, someone once said. She smiled. I changed the topic. Because saying yes felt dangerous. And saying no felt like lying. At night, I sometimes wondered what we were. Then I reminded myself, naming things often breaks them. She never tried to hold my hand. I never tried to touch her shoulder. Yet, when we crossed the road, our steps slowed together. When she laughed, I listened too closely. When I was quiet, she walked slower. That's how love learns to survive when it's afraid of being named. One evening, rain started unexpectedly. She had no umbrella. Without thinking, I stepped closer so my coat covered her shoulder. She didn't move away. She didn't thank me either. That silence said more than words ever could. Later, she said softly, "You don't ask questions." I replied, "Neither do you." We both understood what that meant. At this age, questions come with expectations. And expectations come with fear. So we chose something safer. Presence. Days became months. Months turned into years. People came and went. We remained. Not because we promised to. But because leaving never felt right. Sometimes, I wanted to tell her that I waited for the sound of her steps. That evenings felt incomplete without her. But then I'd see the calm in her face, the peace of not being asked for more than she could give, and I stayed quiet. Because love, when mature, learns restraint. One night, as we sat on a bench watching lights flicker on, she spoke without looking at me. "Do you ever feel like life gave us leftovers?" I thought for a long time before answering. "Yes," I said, "but maybe leftovers taste better when you're no longer hungry for more." She smiled. Not the shy smile of a girl. The grateful smile of a woman who understood exactly what I meant. That night, I realized something. We hadn't named it love. But love had already named us. Time has a strange way of testing the things we never define. Years had passed by then. Not loudly, not noticeably. They slipped through us the way wind passes through open windows, felt but never seen. Our walks continued. Our routines stayed intact. And yet, something underneath had begun to shift. Age does that. It reminds you that nothing is permanent, especially the things you never claim. It started with her steps. They became slower. At first, I pretended not to notice. Then one evening, she stopped mid-walk and pressed her hand against her chest, breathing carefully, as if the air had suddenly become heavier. "I'm fine," she said before I could ask. I nodded. That's what we always did, accepted answers we knew weren't complete. From that day on, our walks shortened. The bench arrived sooner. Silence stretched longer. I wanted to say, you don't have to come if you are tired. But what I meant was, please don't disappear. So I said nothing. One evening, she didn't come. Not the next day either. Or the one after that. By the fourth day, the path felt unfamiliar. Empty in a way that echoed. I walked it alone, angry at myself for noticing how dependent I had become on a presence I never acknowledged. On the fifth day, I stood outside her gate longer than I should have. I didn't knock. I wasn't sure I had the right. That's the cruelty of unlabeled bonds, they feel deep, but they offer no permission. When she finally returned, a week later, she looked thinner. Paler. Her smile tried too hard. I was in the hospital, she said, like she was mentioning bad weather. I felt something tighten in my chest. For what? I asked, instantly regretting the question. She hesitated. Just for a second. Nothing serious, she said. We both knew that was a lie shaped like kindness. From that day on, I watched her more closely. How she stood, how she breathed, how often she paused. She noticed too. You're staring, she said once, gently. I'm just making sure you don't trip, I replied. She smiled, but her eyes softened in a way that scared me. One evening, rain returned, the same kind of quiet drizzle from years ago. We sat on the bench, closer than usual, shoulders nearly touching. Do you ever regret not asking for more? She asked suddenly. The question landed between us like fragile glass. I took my time. At our age, I said slowly, more comes with risks. She nodded. And less? She asked. Less comes with loneliness. She didn't respond right away. I was afraid, she said finally, that if we named it, we'd lose it. I looked at her then. Really looked. The lines on her face. The strength it took to remain gentle. The courage hidden inside her quiet. So was I admitted. That was the first truth we had spoken aloud. After that night, things changed. Not dramatically, but undeniably. She leaned on me sometimes when she stood up. I waited outside her house longer. We began sharing tea after walks. Inside her home felt different, warmer, filled with a life carefully lived. There were no photographs of a partner. Just shelves of books, folded blankets, and memories that had learned to stay quiet. One afternoon, I found her struggling to reach a jar. Without thinking, I took it from her hands. Our fingers brushed. She didn't pull away. Neither did I. We stood there longer than necessary, hands still touching the glass, as if both of us were afraid movement would break something invisible. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because of desire, but because of realization. I wasn't just walking with her anymore. I was worried. And worry, I learned too late, is a form of love. The following weeks brought more hospital visits. More, I'm fine. More silences where answers should have been. One evening, she looked at me with a seriousness I had never seen before. If one day I don't come back, she said, I don't want you to feel like you did. Something wrong. My voice caught. Don't say that. She smiled sadly. You avoid naming things, she said. But you understand them better than most. I wanted to tell her then. That she mattered more than I admitted. That my days revolved around her presence. That losing her would undo me. But fear is a stubborn thing. And age teaches you caution when courage is needed most. So instead, I said the safest thing I could. I'll walk this path anyway. She nodded. And looked relieved. As if knowing someone would remain, even without promises, was enough. That night, I realized the truth. We hadn't named it love because we were afraid of losing it. But silence was beginning to cost us more than words ever could. There comes a moment in every quiet love when silence stops protecting you. It happened slowly, like everything else in our lives. She began missing walks more often. Some days she would come, sit on the bench, and say nothing at all. Other days, the path remained empty, and I learned the sound of absence too well. I stopped pretending it didn't matter. I started counting days. When she didn't appear for 3 days in a row, I knocked on her gate. This time, I didn't question my right. She opened the door with visible effort. Her smile arrived late, as if it had to travel a long distance to reach her face. You shouldn't be standing, I said. And you shouldn't be worrying, she replied. But she stepped aside and let me in. Her house felt smaller now. Or maybe it was her strength that had shrunk. She moved carefully, conserving energy like someone who knew it was limited. We sat at the table. I didn't want you to see me like this, she said softly. Like what? I asked. Needing help. I looked at her hands, the same hands that had carried groceries, folded blankets, and held her life together quietly for decades. Needing help doesn't make you less, I said. It just makes you human. Her eyes filled, but she looked away. From that day on, I became part of her routine. I brought groceries. I reminded her to eat. I waited during appointments she pretended weren't serious. We never discussed names. Not caregiver, not companion, not love, but I was there, and she let me be. One evening, after a long hospital visit, she sat beside me in silence. They said it will get worse before it gets better, she said. And if it doesn't get better? I asked. She smiled, tired, honest. Then it will just get worse. I felt anger rise. Not at her, at time, at fate, at the cruelty of bringing something meaningful so late, only to threaten it so soon. You should move in with your sister, I said, immediately hating the words. She looked at me sharply. Is that what you want? She asked. No, I said quietly. It's what I'm afraid of not being enough for. She studied me. You've been enough for a long time, she said. That night, fear sat between us like a third presence. Days passed. Her strength faded. Mine hardened. I learned how to make soup. How to recognize pain she tried to hide. How to sit quietly when words would only make things heavier. One afternoon, while helping her fold laundry, she stopped suddenly. Why are you doing this? She asked. I froze. For years, she continued, you avoided names. You avoided promises. So why now? Because now I am scared of losing you, I wanted to say. Instead, I said the truth I could no longer hide. Because walking beside you stopped being enough, I said. And I didn't realize it until I thought I might have to walk alone again. She sat down slowly. Her voice trembled when she spoke. I didn't want to be a burden. You were never light, I replied. You were necessary. That word changed something. Necessary. That night, she asked me to stay. Not forever. Not officially. Just, stay. I slept on the chair beside her bed, listening to the rhythm of her breathing, afraid that if I slept too deeply, something might change without warning. In the early hours of the morning, she spoke. I loved once, she said softly. I lost him young. I stayed silent. I promised myself I wouldn't need anyone again, she continued. Then you came along and ruined that promise by doing nothing at all. I smiled sadly. I never planned to, I said. I know, she replied. That's why it worked. Weeks later, her condition worsened. Hospitals became familiar. Waiting rooms felt endless. Time turned cruel. One night, after a particularly difficult day, she held my hand for the first time. Not accidentally, not briefly, deliberately. If I had met you earlier, she said, would things have been different? I squeezed her hand. Maybe, I said, but then we wouldn't be who we are now. She nodded. And if we had named it? She asked. I exhaled. Then fear might have taken it sooner. She smiled faintly. Then I'm glad we didn't, she whispered. But as I watched her sleep that night, a painful realization settled in. We had spent a lifetime protecting something fragile. And now, time was demanding its price. Silence had saved us once. But it might not save us again. There is a strange peace that comes when you stop fighting time. I learned that near the end. She was sleeping more then. Long stretches of silence filled the house, broken only by the soft rhythm of her breathing. I had grown used to sitting beside her bed, holding a book I rarely read, listening instead to life slowing down. One evening, she woke and looked at me with unexpected clarity. You're still here, she said. Yes, I replied. I told you I would be. She smiled, weak but certain. I believed you, she said. Even when you never said it like a promise. Her hand reached for mine. This time, I didn't hesitate. Outside, the world continued as usual. Cars passed. Lights turned on and off. Life moved forward without noticing how carefully we were holding on to what remained. I was thinking today, she said, voiced barely above a whisper. About how strange it is that we spent so long protecting something we never admitted existed. I swallowed. We were afraid, I said. Yes, she agreed. But we were also kind. That word stayed with me. Kind. We hadn't been brave in the way stories often describe love. We hadn't fought loudly or demanded futures we couldn't guarantee. But we had been gentle. And gentleness, I realized too late, is its own form of courage. Later that night, she asked me to open the window. I want to hear the evening, she said. I did. The same sounds from years ago drifted in, distant voices, a dog barking, wind moving through leaves. It felt like a memory looping back on itself. Do you remember our walks? She asked. I remember every one, I said. She smiled. I remember how you're always slowed down, she said. You thought I didn't notice. I wasn't very subtle. No, she said softly. But you were very careful. Silence settled between us, not heavy, not painful. Comfortable. Then she spoke again. If you had asked me to name it, she said, I don't know if I would have said yes. I nodded. And if you had asked now? I asked quietly. She turned her head toward me, eyes tired but honest. Now, she said, I would say it already has a name. It just doesn't need to be spoken. My throat tightened. I loved you, she said then. Not dramatically, not urgently, simply. I didn't rush my reply. I know, I said. And I loved you too. The words felt right, not late, not wasted. Just, complete. She closed her eyes, still holding my hand. I'm not afraid anymore, she whispered. Because I wasn't alone. Neither was I. She passed away early the next morning, quietly, as if she didn't want to disturb the world that had already taken so much. The days that followed were strange. Empty, yet full. People asked questions I didn't know how to answer. Were you family? Were you together? I smiled politely. We walked together, I said. That seemed to confuse them. But it was enough for me. I still walk that path sometimes. Alone now, but not lonely, because love doesn't disappear when it ends. It simply changes its place. We never named it love. But love knew exactly who we were. And it stayed, long after she was gone.